The shadow reveal for the new installment in the Dragon Ball Z Budokai Tenkaichi series shocked the world. In the 6 years I've been on this platform, I've rarely seen passion like that from everyone. So in this video, we're going to be going over the entire history of the Dragon Ball Z Budokai series, starting all the way in 2002. Yeah, I know Budokai and Budokai Tenkaichi are different series, but the evolution from game to game just can't be denied back then. Dragon Ball Z Budokai was developed by dbsz and published by Atari for the PlayStation 2, releasing in the EU on November 2nd, 2002, North America a month later on December 3rd, and then in Japan on February 13th the following year. And this game would also be the beginning of a trend for the Budokai series and was also available on Nintendo GameCube, releasing in the same regions in the last quarter of 2003. The game was, of course, based on the popular anime and manga series we all love, Dragon Ball Z, and featured a story mode that followed the series events from the Saiyan saga all the way to the end of the Cell games. One interesting little known fact about the development of the game is that it was originally going to be developed by a different studio altogether. However, due to some financial struggles of the original studio, development was then handed over to dbsz. Another little known fact, we were probably on Budokai 3 before I finally figured out how to key charge in this damn game. Dragon Ball Z Budokai had a total of 23 characters on release, which included all of the main characters from the Saiyan saga all the way through the Cell games. The game also introduced a new special move system called the Ki system, which allowed characters to use powerful moves by consuming Ki energy, which was displayed in bars under your health. Dragon Ball Z Budokai received positive reviews from critics and was praised for its faithful representation of the series and its intuitive combat system. The game also had a number of unlockable features, including characters, alternate costumes, and a bonus game mode called Dragon World Tour. The story mode was actually decently in-depth, even though the entirety of Dragon Ball is way more extravagant now. You could even unlock more levels during a second playthrough, and at the end of each saga, there was a little bit of a surprise that was available to you, if you like doing a little bit of an evil playthrough, that is. In terms of the game's release, it was announced through various gaming publications and websites, including IGN and GameSpot. Fans of the series were eagerly anticipating the game's release and were excited to finally be able to experience the world of Dragon Ball Z in a fully realized 3D fighting game. Even if, looking back, the graphics were chopped as hell, let's just be real. Dragon Ball Z Budokai 2, aka the most slept on game in my opinion, was developed by dbsz, published by Atari, and it was released on PS2 at the end of 2003 in the EU and US, and once again on GameCube at the end of 2004 in the US, and early 2005 in the EU and AU. This game featured a new capsule system, which is a card-based customization system that allows players to enhance their characters' abilities and unlock new moves, so long as you had a memory card, of course. A shit ton more flashy than Budokai 1, Budokai 2 included a ton of signature special and ultimate attacks from your favorite characters in the series, but subjectively speaking, a little more skill was required this time around to kind of balance the abundance of moves. Ultimate attacks usually required a 3-button combo, and there were various mechanics for different situations. Some combos required strict timing now, button mashing, joystick spinning, etc. This game also introduced a new Dragon World mode, which was a board game style playthrough that takes players through the various story arcs of Dragon Ball Z. While the first Budokai game only covers the events up to and ending at the end of the Cell games, Budokai 2 would end at the conclusion of the battle with Kid Buu, and since there was so much new content to cover, there was gonna have to be some new features as well. Transformations would finally have their time to shine like never before for this series up until this point, with Goku and Vegeta of course, and the introduction of characters like Majin Buu and Gohan definitely added some needed depth to the classic roster. But with new additions came the downscaling of less popular characters. Some lesser popular names like Zarbon and Dodoria were completely cut from the roster this time around, and Frieza and Cell for some reason no longer had the ability to transform and were just in their final forms by default. Dragon Ball Z Budokai 2 features a total of 34 playable characters, 19 returning, 12 new, and 3 what-if characters. Some new additions featured would be Majin Vegeta, Kid Goku, and Super Saiyan 3 Goku. The game also featured improved graphics, being a cel-shaded game this time around, meant to resemble the anime series as much as possible, and sound quality compared to its predecessor Dragon Ball Z Budokai. In addition to the story mode, the game also features a versus mode for players to battle against each other, and a tournament mode where players can compete in a martial arts tournament. But for me, I gotta be honest, the most drawing and memorable thing for me about Budokai 2 was another new thing they added. The introduction of a mechanic so powerful that it shocks me how little everyone talks about it still. The fusion and absorption mechanics in the what if mode. In Dragon Ball Z Budokai 2, players were able to perform the actual fusion dance or Patara in-game. I don't know if everybody forgot about that, but that's definitely something I want back. In the what if mode, things got even crazier because you were able to absorb what feels like damn near everyone with Super Buu. He might as well have just been a CAC with how much you could just go ham with the absorption. There was also a mode called Babidi Spaceship, which was unlocked when you completed Dragon World with all 7 Dragon Balls, and to keep a long story short, this is pretty much how you unlocked Deborah and all the various versions of Majin Buu. One interesting fact about the release of Dragon Ball Z Budokai 2, however, is that in the Japanese version, there's an extra level in Dragon World, and Frieza's son Kuriza is one of Frieza's alternate costumes, a reference to Akira Toriyama's Nekomajin manga. Even though there were plenty of big changes and additions made, the reception for Dragon Ball Z Budokai 2 was only slightly better than the first installment. All of the cel shading and improved graphics to resemble the anime definitely made the game more visually appealing, but a lot of people still thought the gameplay needed work. I mean, GameSpot even called it an underwhelming sequel. IGN would take a similar stance, though theirs was much more optimistic, giving credit to the new mechanics such as the ability to fly and other increased movement are setting the foundation for this to become even bigger. And after over 1.5 million units being sold in just the US on PS2 alone, they were right. Dragon Ball Z Budokai 3, in my opinion, changed everything. Budokai 3 was released in North America on November 16, 2004, and is the 3rd installment in the Dragon Ball Z Budokai series. There was also a limited edition release that was available in America that included behind-the-scenes exposure to the game's development throughout the process that would later release in Europe on November 3rd the same year. This is where things begin to kind of change because in fall of 2005, another new edition of Budokai 3 would release in Europe, including new character models, a few different items, and the ability to change the voices to Japanese voice acting. Japan would later have this same edition released to them as well in February of 2005, so soon thereafter, there would be a greatest hits edition to come about for American consumers, of course, and it would contain all of this content and the features included in the others. Budokai 3 features a refined fighting system with improved mechanics and more characters than its predecessors, and trust me, there were a lot of new and revamped mechanics with this release. Just to name a few, transformations now work differently to where you didn't fall out of it once you fell behind the amount needed to transform in the first place and got knocked down. Beam struggles were now a minigame event instead of canceling out on impact. Dodging and fatigue were now majorly important. Maybe even most important, however, was the teleport counter. The latter allowing you to teleport behind your opponent right at the moment you were hit and counterattack if you had a measly 3 bar to spare. If you had 2 bars though, you couldn't teleport at all. This is where all the flashiness of the Dragon Ball series, in my opinion, was really able to be displayed as well, with so many new visually appealing effects and interactive sequences in fights. This game featured 42 playable characters, which up until this point was the largest roster in the series and was insane at this point in time. Among the new additions are characters like Bardock, Frieza's brother Cooler, Broly the legendary Super Saiyan, and probably most notably, the GT characters. Super Saiyan 4 was now an available transformation for both Goku and Vegeta and allowed them access to new versions of their signature moves, the ×10 Kamehameha and the final Shine attack. Budokai 3 would also introduce a new version of the Dragon World game mode called Dragon Universe, which is an open world mode that allowed us to fly around and explore the world of Dragon Ball Z and participate in battles and all the side missions. The game would also bring back the classic World Tournament mode where players can compete against each other in a martial arts tournament. The story mode also expanded in Budokai 3 a lot, featuring all of the major sagas from Dragon Ball Z, including the Saiyan Saga, Frieza Saga, Cell Saga, and of course the Buu Saga. But it also included what-if scenarios that explore alternate timelines, such as what would happen if Vegeta defeated Goku during their battle on Earth. This time around, there would be about 11 to 12 playable characters in total in Dragon Universe, ranging from Goku all the way to Oob and Broly, who are unlockable later on. In all non-optional battles in Dragon Universe, you were granted the ability to unlock a bonus called a Story Reenactment, which was obtainable by clearing specific criteria for that event, like defeating the boss with a certain move or lasting the entire time limit. This would allow the player the ability to have a different playthrough encounter with other characters available in Dragon Universe, leading to a total of 111 hidden story reenactments overall. And as with the past few games, there were quite a few exclusive versions of Budokai 3. The game also featured a new system for building character stats and unlocking moves, allowing players to customize their characters more than ever before. And of course, with all the gassing I'm doing for this game, you would think that it was well received, right? Well, you would be correct. Dragon Ball Z Budokai 3 was well received by critics and fans alike, selling over 600k in Japan by the end of 2005, making it the most successful Dragon Ball game on PS2 in that region, and pulling in a whopping 1.14 million copies sold in the US. And keep in mind, guys, these sales were before the popularized days of downloading games on your console, so these were hard, physical copies being sold at these numbers. With many praising the game's improved graphics, expansive roster, and new game modes like GameSpot, who memorably gave the game an 8.2 out of 10, Budokai 3 has since become a fan favorite and is considered one of, if not the best Dragon Ball Z games ever made, and it's personally top 3 for me. But the evolution of this series and the massive roster flexes were far from over and really only just beginning, even if the Budokai name itself is kind of done. Unfortunately, a lot of the evolution wouldn't be seen for some years because the next kinda game in this series was Dragon Ball Z Budokai Tenkaichi. Or maybe I just been holding this grudge for too long. Budokai Tenkaichi was released in Japan on October 6, 2005, and in the US and EU on the 18th and 21st respectively. Although Dragon Ball Z Budokai Tenkaichi wasn't made by dbsz and was developed instead by Spike, the Budokai name would somewhat live on as a new game with a completely new look and feature a massive roster of 58 playable characters and 90 total forms. And you're probably asking why I said it like that. On paper, this of course sounds great. However, Spike would take a slightly different, more questionable approach maybe from dbsz when it came to filling out the roster of this game, but we'll get to that later. The biggest change to this gameplay from the previous Budokai series was the introduction of the 3D combat, which allowed players to move around a fully 3D arena and engage in battles with way more freedom. Now, this was a completely different engine than the traditional Budokai series, again being developed by Spike, not dbsz, so despite the misleading title, it isn't considered to officially be a part of that series, but because of the popularity of the Budokai series in the past, Atari thought this to be the best approach to gain sales. Unlike the Budokai series, however, there were no in-game transformations that could be performed, but instead, the different forms of characters had to be selected before the battle began. Really sick way to sell a big roster disingenuously. Budokai Tenkaichi also went on to include various classes of characters with special abilities that would alter some aspect of the battle, like large tier characters such as Broly and Bojack, or great apes who didn't flinch and couldn't be thrown. This new gameplay mechanic also brought a lot of excitement and novelty to the series. Characters could now perform their signature moves in full 3D, giving the battles a cinematic flair and once again improving the visuals in a huge way. The game featured a total of 56 characters, each with their own unique set of moves and abilities. This was a significant increase from the previous game and gave players a lot more options when it came to choosing their favorite fighters. If you don't mind being Super Saiyan Goku for the whole fight, I guess. One of the most interesting new features of Dragon Ball Z Budokai Tenkaichi, however, was the Dragon History mode. This mode allowed players to experience the story of Dragon Ball Z in a way more interactive way than before. You could play through key moments in the story and even make decisions that could affect the outcome of later events. This mode added a lot of replayability to the game and gave fans a new way to experience the classic storyline over and over. In addition to the new gameplay mechanics and story mode, Dragon Ball Z Budokai Tenkaichi also introduced a new Ultimate Battle mode. In this mode, players could create their own custom characters and battle against other players' custom characters. This was a fun way for players to showcase their creativity and battle skills at one point in time. Even with a new look and boasting such an improved experience subjectively, however, Dragon Ball Z Budokai Tenkaichi was met with a relatively average response from gamers and critics alike. Of course, the roster size and improved cel-shaded graphics would be positive aspects of many reviews. However, a lot of the general player base didn't necessarily take a liking to the more complex controls Spike had implemented, making this game debatably more difficult than all of the past Budokai games. Dragon Ball Z Budokai Tenkaichi would go on to sell over 1 million copies in North America and Europe by the end of March in 2006, and over 500,000 copies in Japan by the end of the previous year. Overall, Dragon Ball Z Budokai Tenkaichi was one of the most significant leaps forward for the series. The introduction of 3D combat in the Dragon History mode kind of breathed new life into the franchise, and it kept fans engaged. Being relatively well received by the fan base, this would push the franchise to keep improving on the formula they have, and improve from this game they certainly did. Dragon Ball Z Budokai Tenkaichi 2 had by far the biggest roster to date, with over 120 playable characters, and I think it's safe to say Spike learned some lessons from their first attempt. This game was developed by Spike and published by Bandai and Atari for the PlayStation 2 and Wii in 2006. One huge change would be that all characters featured in previous games would now be available, and battles could literally involve up to 10 different characters all fighting one at a time, with one teammate switching in after another in a free battle. Most of the versions of this game had 16 large maps, 5 new and 11 from the previous game. And also, like I said, Spike learned. This game included in-game transformations again. Transformations in Budokai Tenkaichi 2 could be achieved by holding down a specified button, then pressing the direction of the corresponding form on your ability map. One of the most significant changes to this game was the addition of the new 3D camera system, which allowed for more dynamic and immersive battles. Dragon Ball Z Budokai Tenkaichi 2 would also include a new beam struggle mechanic, which was activated when two opposing beams collided and players had to use rapid button presses to overpower their opponent and win the beam struggle. Budokai Tenkaichi 2 also introduced a lot of new gameplay mechanics that really shook things up from here. They added the ability to fly around the entire battlefield, which made battles feel more like actual fights from the show. They also introduced a new system for charging up ki, where you had to rapidly press a button instead of just holding it down. This of course would make things a little bit more challenging trying to charge up mid-battle, but also made it way more satisfying when you caught them in that infinite and you just release all those bars like you Jay-Z or something. They also added new special attacks, more environmental destruction, and a ton of new characters. All in all, it was a massive improvement over the first game and set the stage for even more improvements, if you could believe it, in the later installment. In terms of game modes, Tenkaichi 2 would mark the return of the Dragon History mode, which allowed players to play through key events in the Dragon Ball Z storyline. The game also added a brand new story mode called the Ultimate Battle, which featured an original storyline with unique battles and cutscenes along with the traditional tournament mode seen in every Budokai game. Now, going back to some of those gameplay mechanics, Tenkaichi 2 would also be the introduction of a number of new things, such as the ability to perform teleporting attacks and the introduction of the new Z Burst Dash, which allowed players to quickly close the distance between themselves and their opponent. Reception was once again overall positive for this installment of the Dragon Ball Z Budokai Tenkaichi series, as critics praised the massive roster and pretty graphics the series is known for per se, but these games were special. The amount of fan service that was provided each time had been significant. Once again, however, the Tenkaichi series was still criticized for its complex controls due to having a largely casual player base, even if the general combat did usually come down to 2 buttons. The complexities and intricacies of every character and the game itself made it easy and fun to learn, but very hard to master for most. This installment of the Tenkaichi series was so notable and well received, however, that one of the toughest critics of Dragon Ball Z games, X-Play, awarded it Fighting Game of the Year, and gave it a 4 out of 5 rating. The only other time that happening being for Budokai 3, which I think should justify my glazing for that game. It would also go on to score between 7.5 and 8.5 between other renowned game critiquing platforms. So with such reviews would of course come the sales to back it, as Dragon Ball Z Budokai Tenkaichi 2 would amass another 1.18 million sales worldwide and become Bandai Namco's top selling game of 2006. But once again, for Dragon Ball fans and gamers, the best was yet to come. Dragon Ball Z Budokai Tenkaichi 3 was released in November 2007 for the PlayStation 2 and Wii consoles. This is probably also going to be the longest section of the video as well, because there is a lot to unpack with this one, so bear with me guys. This game was the third and final installment, so we thought, in the Dragon Ball Z Budokai Tenkaichi series, and contained the biggest, most insane roster we have ever seen, and it wasn't even close. With over 160 characters to choose from, guys. You heard 160. It's safe to say that this game had a character for everybody. Tenkaichi 3 also introduced new characters from the Dragon Ball GT storyline, such as Nova Shenron and all of the GT Goku forms. This was pretty much the culmination of everything Bandai Namco and Atari had worked on for the past half-decade and grew to be a cornerstone in anime gaming. It essentially touched upon every single installment of the Dragon Ball franchise, and also even featured one of Toriyama's original characters, Arale. There were even characters that were never before seen made exclusively for this game, such as some of the other Saiyan's Grade 8 forms. Budokai Tenkaichi 3 had some pretty cool new stuff added in it as well to allow it to stand out even more above its predecessors. You've got Battle Replay, which lets you save your favorite fights to an SD card so you can watch them over and over again, and now we got Day and Night stages too, which is perfect for all of you guys that really want to reenact those fights from the anime. Plus, you can even transform into a Grade 8 by using the moon, which was insane. Some stages even have different times of day like dawn and afternoon, so they were really trying to pay attention to detail. Oh, and you can change the aura of your character too, which was so sick. If you're playing on the Wii, you can even battle online with people from all over the world, so it's safe to say that this one was peak right here. Dragon Ball Z online multiplayer all the way back then, guys, can you believe that? They even added a ranking system. They went crazy with this game. Now, for those of us playing on PlayStation 2, don't worry, there was no shortage of cool features for us as well. They added this new disc fusion thing where if you pop in a Budokai Tenkaichi 1 or 2 disc during play, you can unlock the Ultimate Battle or Ultimate Battle Z modes from those games, so you're still getting some extra content even without the online play. Oh, and just a heads up, the Wii version only supports 480p display mode, so yeah. In terms of gameplay mechanics though, there is a lot to go over. There was so much new stuff that I probably won't even be able to go over half of it here. Of course, there were some cool new moves in the game, like combo attacks and character-specific combos. With these moves, you can do more damage and make more longer and flashy combos as if there already weren't infinite. But there was also something called a blast combo, where you can add a blast attack to your combos for extra damage and even a little bit more sometimes. Y'all are gonna have to let me know down below in the comments though if blast pickups existed in Tenkaichi 2, I honestly don't remember. However, some characters couldn't use this, like Videl and Hercule of course. Dragon Ball Z Budokai Tenkaichi 3 would go far more in depth than this though, as most of us wouldn't find out until a little bit later on that we were probably only scratching the surface. Things like the Sonic Sway, which is a move that lets you dodge your opponent's attacks, giving you a perfect opening to strike back, but it only works on basic melee attacks, not on more powerful rushes or smash attacks, and if you successfully dodge, you can hit back quickly while your opponent is still in recovery. Another revamped move would be the Z Burst Dash, which is faster and more evasive than the Dragon Dash, although not completely new. It lets you get behind your opponent quickly to attack or avoid their attacks, with the drawback of using a lot of stamina unless you had certain Z items. Lastly, there was a move called Armor Break that lets you destroy your opponent's clothes and armor with Energy Clash and Ultimate Blast. The game made several improvements over its predecessors. One of the biggest changes was the ability to perform ultimate attacks, which were cinematic finishing moves unique to each character. And there was also a new system called Z points, where the more a character had, the more Z items they could be equipped with, so this game was letting us go crazy. It also featured all of the classic game modes like Dragon History and the World Tournament. In addition, this game would also introduce a new mode called the Dragon Battle Collection and Ultimate Battle. Dragon Battle Collection allowed players to collect and trade cards with other characters to build their ultimate deck, while Ultimate Battle was a survival mode where players fought through an endless series of battles to see how long they could last. Surprisingly, even with such anticipation for a game this massive, Dragon Ball Z Budokai Tenkaichi 3 received only average reviews on both platforms. Gamazon and Game Trailer would give it a 7.8 and 7.6 score respectively, with IGN complaining about the comparatively underwhelming story mode, gimmicky disc fusion function which, sure, and the lag experienced while playing online with the can you believe it guys, Nintendo Wii Wi-Fi. Overall, Dragon Ball Z Budokai Tenkaichi 3 would sell north of 1 million copies worldwide. However, the impact it would have over the years was undeniable, with this roster being one of the most notable of all time for its size and the introduction of so many new mechanics to the series to make you feel as much like a Saiyan as possible. The Dragon Ball Z Budokai and Budokai Tenkaichi series have definitely had an impact on my life in a positive way, I like to think. I remember getting the very first Dragon Ball Z Budokai game. I was like 6 years old. I got it for Christmas and I wanted to open that shit the night before because I didn't want anybody else to take it. I think my cousin was staying the weekend or something like that. I remember mowing lawns around the neighborhood all day to be able to afford Tenkaichi 3 myself. And it's just little things like that that I hold dear. I know a lot of you guys probably have similar memories. Dragon Ball Z Budokai Tenkaichi 4 or Super Tenkaichi or Tenkaichi 0, whatever it's gonna be called. I hope it brings back those waves of nostalgia I get from just seeing the box art of those old games. Like a lot of you guys, that game is probably gonna be my life for the foreseeable future when it finally does drop, so I can't wait to see how it compares to all of the greatness that came before it. I really hope you guys enjoyed the video and maybe even learned something you didn't already know about the series, such as Atari having the bright idea to fly their new Tenkaichi series under the Budokai banner to capitalize on our previous love for the Budokai series. Don't forget to leave a like for this condensed history of Dragon Ball Z Budokai and Budokai Tenkaichi, and for so much anticipation after almost 20 years, we are finally back in business, boys. Have a great day, and I will see you all in the next one. Bye, guys.